Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, first of all, I'm going to try something a little different now. Using some of the tools in YouTube, if you just come down here to the bottom, way down here, and use the slider bar across the bottom, you can actually see that I've highlighted certain regions of the video. So I know my videos are kind of long, we get quite in depth here, but you can kind of pick the parts of the video that you'd like to watch, and they're all labeled so that hopefully it's a lot easier to navigate. So we're going to produce one video today, and we're going to cover as much as we can, from a quick review of what summer gave us all the way to what I'm looking for longer term in South America at the end. So here we go. You've seen me show you this before. This would be the average 500 millibar height anomalies, in other words the trough and ridge pattern, that we had from June 1st to mid-August. And it favored a very large ridge planted here over parts of the Pacific Northwest and the Canadian Prairie. And what ended up happening was the jet stream flow had to go around that, and then at times it kind of broke into a trough over parts of the Great Lakes and around the Hudson Bay. But this was a very dominant feature in the flow of the jet stream. What we want to talk about was, one, what did that result in terms of our temperature and precipitation pattern? Two, when did it break? And three, did we forecast this well way back before summer started? So with that as the beginning, let's go take a look at what it did to our precipitation pattern. So again, this is June 1st through mid-August. And as you look at this particular map, you can see the influence of that setup. We had an active southwestern monsoon, but all around it extremely dry, following the flow of that ridge. And that included much of the western Corn Belt here. So from June 1st through mid-August, remember these are ranks. So the closer you are to 129 would be the driest, the closer to 1 would be the wettest. Across the Cotton Belt, through the eastern Corn Belt, into the northeast, quite wet. The only other region we saw some drought development was in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, in terms of temperatures, this is what we saw. That ridge, many regions in the west, from June 1st to mid-August, had their hottest such time period on record. Again, this goes back 129 years. While much of the south, the southeast, we saw near normal to cooler than average temperatures. So now we get to that next question. How well did we forecast this? So we're going to go look at that time period. Using the model runs that were released on June 1st for the prediction of June, July, and August, what did we see in terms of precipitation? And if you just look at these and pick up on the pattern, we were picking up on drier signals here, wetter across much of the south. All right. Now, if we go back again, this is what we got. So did it pick up on the dry signals in here? Pretty well it did. Was it wetter across the south? Yes. But the extension of the wetter weather here into parts of the eastern Corn Belt and into the northeast, that's going to be something that I think that the model didn't necessarily see quite as well, but we don't expect it to. When we use these long-range deterministic models, we're looking here for patterns overall. If I had to give it a grade, to be honest, I'd give it a B. That picked up pretty well on that pattern. Now, what about the temperature side of things? Let's flip over and see that. This is what it predicted in terms of temperatures. Cooler south, much warmer to the north. And as you see here, let's just go back and take a look at that temperature pattern. We had that down pat pretty well. So while it may not have seen the record heat in the west, the model did a pretty darn good job with picking up on this summer pattern, at least the European did. Now, I'm going to show you this in the new long range. That's going to be, I'm going to show you the old one now. You get to get the brand new update next week when it comes out. I'll be sure to put it in my opening statements here next Monday. So from there, let's move on to what has happened since. Now, from the 15th of August to the end of August, that ridge pushed here. And we had another one build in the Canadian Maritimes. So the flow went around this. Very strong jet stream flow came here through Alaska, and troughs just dug into this area. And we lifted quite a bit of moisture on this side of this big high here. We brought in the heat in this area, but just triggered a lot of storms that went through some of the driest regions here that we had all year long. So take a look at this. This is the temperature pattern first that resulted from that height pattern. So again, ridge with the trough in between gives you the cooler weather in the northwest and the heat in the northeast and the warmth across much of the Midwest. What a break in the pattern when you compare it to the front 2/3 of summer. And what about precipitation? Well, this is where we currently stand. Just from the middle of August to the beginning of September, we have several locations that were near record dry here that are not having in the last 15 days some of the wettest conditions in history. There have been places, here in northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and back to Nebraska and South Dakota that have had 1 to 1.5 feet of rain. And then, of course, your eye is drawn to the path right in through here, where we see the heavy rain. And that was contributed to first by Fred and then by Ida that went through here. And if we just take a step back and look at this pattern, it just really represents such a significant shift in the overall flow pattern. And the previous pattern was around for about 10 weeks. And so we're beginning to ask, is this something we're to continue to see? And I'm going to get to an answer to that question here in a few moments. But first, let's go through the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. Again, the break in that pattern has added all of this rainfall to this area. And this is just the last 7 days. There was more before that, remember? But you've got pockets in here that were well in excess of 6 to 10 inches of rain. And then as we look at where Ida went, so Ida's main path kind of curled right in through here. Most of the heaviest rain was on the eastern side, which we expected. But very interestingly, you'll notice here that where Ida went, this is very agriculturally productive area right here along the river, right? There's a lot of forested land, but we're in the cotton belt in parts of Mississippi and Alabama here. But not to take anything away from those that were hit, but in terms of hitting agriculturally productive area, this kind of skirted some of those regions. That's just the point I'm trying to make. Now, it hammered parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, getting into Kentucky. And then we, of course, saw all the flooding that went on here in parts of Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. And we're still letting Ida get on out of here today. In fact, just looking at some of this area where we were anticipating those very heavy rainfall, I'll just show you my Twitter feed. I was watching what a lot of folks were tweeting. Ginger Z, she's kind of a famous meteorologist here. You can see she got up some video here of some fish that were stranded in New Jersey. There was lots of video of the flooded out subway. In fact, this is one of this person's house. You can just see the water coming in here into the bedroom, breaking through, pushing through the door. Just a tremendous amount of water in parts of New Jersey, and that's actually in Brooklyn. Don't forget, we did have tornadoes. We had 9 separate reports of tornadoes out of this, and this is one that was in New Jersey. Remember, hurricanes and their remnants do have strong shear on their right-hand side, and that's where we typically get tornadoes embedded within these things. And then there was one other one I wanted to show you. Let's slide down here to this one in... where is it? It was the one that were there. These were the ones that were in the subway system, and almost like an artesian well set up here, right? So the pressure coming through the drainage system, pushing up there and just leaking into the subway. So I just thought I would share with you some of the things that we saw. Now, where are we going with the tropics? Well, this is the latest update from this afternoon. The National Hurricane Center is watching one area here. They've given it a 20% chance of developing, but you can see that it's going to hug too close to land, staying over the Yucatan and then eventually coming into this part of Mexico, and no strong evidence of that one developing. We're going to continue to watch big systems coming off of Africa, and Larry is our latest named system here. And Larry is really going to be moving quickly toward Bermuda. It appears that it's going to miss the Lesser Antilles and miss the East Coast. This is the latest evidence. But if that center of the track does take target toward Bermuda, that at least keeps it away from the U.S. coastline. We'll watch to see if there's any sort of a southern or southerly trajectory with Larry, but there's pretty good evidence based upon where the subtropical ridge is currently placed that it will stay in this particular path. But things are not done rolling off of Africa. So this is Larry, but we'll see behind it. Look at the convection coming off of the Sahel, off of the Ivory Coast here. There are more tropical waves coming, and I'm just going to let you know, the large-scale subsidence in the Pacific is aiding in the rising motion of the Atlantic. And on top of that, those water temperatures there are still quite warm. And you do see the cold water trail right here from Ida. Of course, the hurricane extracts heat, and it churns up a lot of colder water from below, but this will recover quite quickly. And as I showed you, or as I mentioned, the wind shear across the tropical Atlantic, well, if this is the climatological value here, we have spent so much of this summer time period below that number. So remember, low wind shear environments are conducive to tropical cyclone development. So if we maintain this, we should expect to see a busy second half of the hurricane season. And the peak of the hurricane season is next Friday. That would be the climatological peak. Just to show you how much of it we still have to go, this is put together by Colorado State. And they've got each system named here. And you can pause it and take a closer look at this, or even go to this website yourself and take a look at this. But what I wanted to show you was we're currently ahead of normal on the accumulation of what we call cyclone energy. But just a reminder, we've still got the rest of this hurricane season to get through, and we are expecting it to remain quite active. All right. From there, I would like to show you the current wind field outside late in the afternoon on Monday. A few things to point out. This is what's left of Ida. We have a low that's developing right here. That's actually the remnants of once tropical system named Nora that's pulling in some moisture from the south, but also bringing some moisture from the Pacific, and that's what spread a lot of that rain across parts of the northern plains and upper Midwest. We have seen this afternoon some stronger winds here across the Great Basin, which is helping to blow a lot of that smoke across that area. If I show you this by looking here at some satellite imagery from this afternoon, we can see those pieces moving together. So if we just kind of look here late in the afternoon, this broad shield of cloud here is associated with that low, spreading a lot of rain in this area. So we're adding to those totals I showed you earlier. There's some convection along the coast, which is expected, and there goes Nora, but higher pressure behind it clearing skies out here. But we can see once again the wildfire smoke across the west, and we know that earlier this week some of those fires did cross over the peak of the Sierra Nevada and are burning near Lake Tahoe, for example, covering much of Nevada and Northern California with a lot of wildfire smoke. Speaking of that wildfire smoke, this is just a forecast of where we expect it to go over the next couple of days, at least through Friday here. And we're seeing that smoke spread throughout the Great Basin into the northern plains. And it's really following the flow, the upper level flow of the atmosphere at this point. Okay, from there, let's shrink that back out and tell you what we're watching for later on tonight. This will be the target area for severe storms late tonight, parts of Nebraska and Kansas. And getting right into it, I'd like to show you what the high-res NAM model is suggesting here. So let's play this through until we get to late afternoon. You can see here that on the tail end of that cloud shield I just showed you, we are starting to see some of those stronger storms move through this area. This will be in the late afternoon, early evening time frame. And the setup right now is that some of these storms could bow out, like you see here, maybe moving toward Kansas City late tonight. Many of you will be watching this after this has already occurred, so we'll see how well the model did. But what happens is that rain kind of moves through Iowa, moves through Minnesota and Wisconsin, and the frontal boundary kind of hangs out on the back side here. We get a secondary push of moisture that comes through southeastern Montana in the overnight hours, in the morning hours tomorrow on Friday. And that might move through the Dakotas, but watch what happens by the time we get into Friday evening. The boundary still sits here, and on that we're going to continue to watch for scattered showers and storms that wrap into that low that's sitting over Wisconsin on Friday evening. More storms here back in the high plains of Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming as well. And then letting this go into Saturday morning, so this is of course holiday weekend. By Saturday morning, that boundary is stalled into this area. So more rain coming through Missouri and Kansas, and that was an area that had been dry. And we're going to watch that rain clear to the eastern Corn Belt as we get into Saturday evening. So this is a slow-moving system. From Thursday to Saturday, it only moves from here to here. So we're going to watch the whole time period where that precipitation is going to go. Now from there, I prefer what the European model solution looks like on this, and I'll show you the comparison in a few moments. But primarily, it's driven by this low that's up in Canada. So you see that low in Canada wraps up over the next couple of days here into Friday night into the Hudson Bay. And there's generally a broader pressure trough, a front, if you will, draped through here that we saw the storms coming through on. And they press by Saturday into Sunday right into the eastern Corn Belt in the Great Lakes and Ontario. And there's that stalled out boundary early Sunday morning. So let's see where it goes from there. Playing this forward through Sunday afternoon and evening, then getting into the holiday here on Monday, which by the way, my next video will come out on Tuesday. I'm going to spend the holiday with my family this time, so you'll get my next video on Tuesday. But what we'll see here is that by Monday afternoon and evening, that low is wrapping itself up into New England, and we can see the tail end of the front cutting right down here through parts of our cotton belt, from the mid-Atlantic to the cotton belt. And high pressure builds in behind this. But we're going to watch for another system. We keep seeing these systems kind of sneak out through parts of the Canadian Prairie, and this one's going to be pulling in here by a Monday night through Tuesday morning into the Great Lakes, and it will drag a front right in through this area. So we're going to get some early week rain that comes through Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, possibly this part of the Ohio River Valley as well. And then that one goes into New England by next Thursday. Now, at that point, what I'm going to be watching most carefully is if we continue to see the pattern favoring this storm track coming through the Canadian Prairie. That's going to be critical. And to answer that, let's first go just do a little model comparison, then we'll see what those heights are going to do, okay? So through the next week, there we go, let's get that so we can see it. This is total accumulated precipitation from the European model. And again, it's one low, second low, stalled out frontal boundary, right? And then we just have the scattered convection to the south, and everything kind of gathers into the northeast. So you see here what the total accumulated precipitation is from the European model. The GFS has something quite similar. Okay, so if you just go back and forth, Euro, GFS, they actually have the almost identical features, but the way they both extract the precipitation is just different. And that's why we often like to compare the two by showing you this map. And again, just a reminder, these colors represent wetter than normal, and these represent, excuse me. These colors represent where the European model is wetter, and these are where the GFS is wetter, okay? So just notice the GFS is wetter from Michigan through this part of Ontario and parts of the Eastern Corn Belt. The GFS tends to, the European tends to be wetter back into Iowa and Minnesota and then up into this section of Ontario. So just a couple of different things to take note of here. It's worth pausing it and having a closer look. But both models do want to do this with the pattern from week 1 into week 2. And that is build a ridge here, but don't leave it around for too long. By September 12th, 13th, and 14th, you see that ridge that was established, the models are trying to now sweep a trough out of the Gulf of Alaska back into that same area. And that's going to push the heat ahead and keep the pattern overall open. So we look out there and we see the week 2 precipitation anomalies, and we're drier here initially because of the deep trough that comes in. But then as we move it out, we're going to see increased precipitation chances once again in this area. So that gets you out to at least mid-September, and that's where my real discussion on this long range is going to start. But first, let's at least cover what's going on with the temperatures, because it's extremely hot in the southern plains. We've got heat advisories out down here, high humidity as well, temperatures deep into the 90s late in the afternoon. Much cooler to the north. Now, where's this temperature pattern going? Well, let's blow this up and have a look, because this was the forecast for today, which did a pretty darn good job. If we go forward from Thursday into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, a big section of the country right in through here is going to be seeing cooler than normal weather through the next 3 to 4 days. You see the ridge redeveloping in the west by early next week. That's Monday, getting into Tuesday and Wednesday. And if the flow ends up coming around like this, we keep the cooler weather wrapped around the eastern Corn Belt, the Northeast, and the Great Lakes states, while the above average temperatures rebuild back to the west, and the south central United States stays hot. Now going out there day 5 through 10, what we've got here is from the GFS ensemble. I liked its solution on this, keeping that ridge around a lot at the time, day 5 through 10, with the trough here. But it moves, the pattern moves, and that's why we see day 10 through 15, the next trough sweeping in here, and the heat moving to the east with it. So we're going to go on a bit of a roller coaster ride, which is anticipated in September. If you're kind of tucked away, well, actually the whole of North America, but the cooler weather we have this weekend will be replaced next weekend by some warmer conditions. That's the main takeaway point here. Now, from there, I want to show you a couple of the bigger picture things that we've been keeping an eye on. Vertical and zonal integral of atmospheric angular momentum. We're just looking at the speed, the westward movement of the atmosphere. And starting in July, coming out of the tropics into August, and now finally into September, we've seen a reduction of momentum in the polar jet stream. But most of that reduction has been over Europe. It has not been over the North Pacific. And a lot of that's due to the fact that the MJO has now set up over the Indian Ocean, and it keeps kind of staying over in this general direction, moving over parts of Australia, avoiding the West Pacific and avoiding a reset over to phase 8, which means there's a lot of subsidence over the West Pacific. Now, this in part is why we keep continuing to get a lot of tropical activity. But this just tells me that this is not something that's going to rob jet stream momentum. Now, what's the translation of that? What are we going to do with that? Well, I want to look at the brand new European weekly forecast. And what I want to do here, this just came out, I was waiting for this to come out, is I want to take you out to this time period right here. September 15th, to October 15th. There were some indications of building in some higher atmospheric pressure in this area. And if that happened, we ended up getting kind of this ring of fire precipitation pattern around it. And the models backed off on that a little bit. They are still keeping this area wetter than normal going forward. But then as we get into mid-October, we do generally see a drying trend toward the middle. For example, right in through here, where we expected to be doing a lot of harvest, we see a drier trend. And what does it really mean to be wetter than average in the high plains in October? That's not much precipitation. And this is starting to fall back in line with some earlier thinking we had about the potential influence of the cooler ocean temperatures on this particular pattern. Because as we've been discussing, La Nina is likely to make a repeat appearance this upcoming fall and winter. We can already see some of the cooler water there. So this whole region is what's kind of key, I think, in allowing the midsection of the country to go over drier. Now, at the same time, we do notice that we're going to be increasing precipitation chances possibly along the west coast, specifically in the Pacific Northwest. And bringing in that moisture early in this area would be a big benefit to just recharging the soil moisture, helping with some pasture growth late in the season, and then getting maybe that winter wheat crop going. That's something I'm going to be watching there quite carefully. But let's move on from there and let's talk now about what those seasonal forecasts are. Now, new updates are going to come out on the 5th, so I'll be reporting this at the end of the weekend, and I'll release a Monday report for those that are subscribed to my daily report that shows you the latest information. But the old data, which came out at the beginning of August, says that September, October, November, that whole time period, is going to favor drier conditions here. And we remember that the National Multi-Model Ensemble, this is a model run in the United States, suggests the same thing. Drier conditions along the south, but into the Midwest as well, with wetter than normal conditions here. That seems to be what the models are suggesting going forward. Now from here, what I'm interested in seeing is that that's going to continue. And again, we've already seen the trend. I just showed it to you a few moments ago. The trending drier by mid-October. That would be a very positive sign. And even to be wetter than normal here in mid-October does not mean that this is just a deluge of rain. I'm going to watch it carefully to see if there's any sort of transition with this, but it is consistent with my overall thinking of where this pattern is going to go. Now, next I want to turn my attention to South America, okay? Because when we look out here at this time period of mid-September to mid-October, if I just play this forward here, you see that through mid-October, the models are suggesting that some of the key growing areas right in through here, which they can start planting in mid-September, may favor a drier bias with wetter to the to the east and wetter to the north. Argentina seems to be drier as well. Now, thinking about all of that, all right, thinking about that longer term forecast for the start of the growing season, this will get a lot of folks wondering if this is going to delay planting in South America. And we know that historically, when there are La Ninas, that tends to happen. But I'd like to actually maybe show you that and prove that to you a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to show you this particular graphic. Now this comes from the University of Maine, and what I have done is for that strip right there in South America, I pulled off a time series for September and October total precipitation, okay? And I wanted to see what made these really dry years. So what I did was I chose a few of those driest years, and I went back and I reconstructed a few important factors that got us there. And what I want to do with you now is show you what it takes to have a dry start to the growing season in South America. Okay, so here we go. Choosing these years as analog years for dry starts, there's almost always a developing La Nina. And that La Nina tends to get quite strong, especially right here along the coast. All right, now are we going to see that? Well, you'll get a brand new update of this soon. Whoops, let's go back to this one. But right now, if we just look at those seasonal sea surface temperatures, and let's blow this out to a global view, we see that there is colder water in the forecast there. Next, if we go look at what the upper level flow of the atmosphere must be doing, basically the MJO, it really needs to stay focused here either on the Indian Ocean, phase 3, or move over here to phases 4, 5, maybe to 6. But generally speaking, subsidence across the Pacific, subsidence across much of South America. So if we keep seeing the MJO stay where it currently is down here, that would be a factor that would lead toward a drier start to the season. Next, I went back and I said, what happened in throughout the month of August with pressure anomalies? because I'm specifically concerned about the strength of the intertropical convergence zone. Because as I look at it here, the pressures were lower in that area. And so I looked historically and found that during those years where we had dry starts to the season, there was lower atmospheric pressure there. But look at this. There was a high here, and a low there. And the question is, did this August give us the same thing? And we see that high here this year, and there was a high there, and generally lower heights. Now again, these are anomalies, so this is how we can use this analysis. And that's another indicator that we could have a slow start to the monsoon. And I'm not done just yet. I then went and looked at humidity levels all the way to about 500 millibars. I'm seeing how deep the moisture is in this area. And this year, in the month of August, we had quite a bit of moisture in our intertropical convergence zone here, but we were drier over the Amazon. What would we need August to look like if it was going to lend itself to a drier September and October? Well, something kind of similar, although it would have needed to be a lot drier in this particular area than what we saw here, okay? Actually, you know what? I just noticed something. My color bars are different. This one goes out to 30% humidity. This one only goes to 12. So these might be similar in magnitude overall. I guess if I just had to stitch all this together and kind of give you what I think might happen here, seeing the European model predict that that time period, September 18 to October 18, could favor drier conditions in here is very consistent with the current behavior of the atmosphere. Let's just leave it at that. And again, you'll get new updates from me on this next week. And also for those of you that receive my reports, you'll get this coming out before the markets open after the holiday. So I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Hopefully you found the scroll bar along the bottom useful. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks.